the negotiations between the US and Iran have started, and Iran is dominating this negotiation. The very first thing that we know is that Iran changed the location of these negotiations. They were supposed to take place in Istanbul, but instead, Iran has demanded that the negotiations move to Oman. The question is why? What I think is happening with Turkey is that Iran is not happy with Turkey. When threat was taking place against Iran, they thought that the US was going to bomb and that the regime was going to fall. And I think that kind of upset the Iranians. And that is why they probably decided to move the meeting to Oman. Now that the threats of bombing have calmed down a little bit, it doesn't mean that it's off, but now that things are more settled, so many people have asked the question, what truly happened? Specifically when we talk about the currency, what happened to the Iranian currency? How do we get to this point again? Iran has been under sanctions for years, ever since the revolution with the Ayatollah. This was, I believe, in the 1970s. And since then, Iran cannot properly trade with its neighbors and other partners around the world because of the sanctions put by the West. And we're talking about the sanctions, from the United States and sanctions from Europe. So things have been very difficult for Iran. And so after the 12 days conflict between Iran and Israel, Israel realized that things were more difficult with Iran. They have a difficult time accessing Iran the way they used to, all right? And Iran's missile program has shown to be a major threat to Israel. Israel wants to control the region. They want to be able to go into any of those countries, bomb what they want. Look at what they're doing in Lebanon, Palestine, right? They even bombed Qatar. They want to be able to do the same thing in Iran. They don't want anyone in that region to be comparable to Israel. So they decided to find another way to bring down Iran. And so they chose to hit their currency. What they're doing is that they're putting pressure on other countries that have to trade with Iran. And most importantly, its neighbors. So the Mossad in Israel work with those countries to stop trading with Iran. When no one wants to buy your goods, right, or your product, the Iranian currency started crashing. What that did is it caused a protest in Iran. And that protest was peaceful. This is what the Mossad, right, the CIA wanted to provoke in Iran. They went inside and started arming some of their people in there. The people who, are Iranians who work, with the Mossad and the CIA. They gave them weapons. So while people were protesting peacefully, these people started shooting. And they were instructed to kill government official, police officer, and all of that. And that is how this so-called revolution was going to take place, right? And so the first step was to bring the population to turn against the authorities, police, you name them. And they started killing. They even got to the point where they were burning some of the police officers alive. Of course, you're not going to see that in the mainstream media. Independent medias were showing that. The mainstream media never told you that. And the second step here is that once the population, right, has been incited enough and has done most of the fighting and we're starting to see the government collapse, then they bring in the jets. Even right before the protest becomes very popular, Netanyahu traveled to the White House. He went in to tell Trump, look, we believe that this time is going to work. We've done the groundwork. Protests are going to get worse because, we have begun to instruct people to take the weapons. And we want you, the United States, to come in there and bomb Iran. So this time his plan was that he's going to send the United States to bomb Iran and right? They're going to act like they have nothing to do with it. And then once Iran has been subdued completely, where, you know, the air defense system are down or whatever, right? Because they felt like most importantly for Netanyahu, his thing is that the US has the weapons to bring down the air defense system, which is not true. They don't have that type of weapons. You cannot bring down S-400s that Iran now have. Because the last time after the 12 days war, and they saw that the air defense system they had was not that effective, immediately, if you think about it very well, the president of Iran traveled to Russia. And Russian president said to him, he said, you should have let us help you. Because, you know, Iran made the argument, we wanted to use our own weapons. And this time, they now have S-400s. They are the best. Matter of fact, S-500s are the best one that just came out. But before S-500, the S-400s are the best defense system in the world. And for Netanyahu, he believes that the US can destroy those S-400. He's dreaming. That cannot happen. So that was the plan. Step two was that once we see that the population is taking over and the government is starting to fall down, then the US will come in there. But in order for step two to properly work, they needed the mainstream propaganda media. That's why you saw during the media so many images of, oh yeah, Iran is taking. Matter of fact, there were some channels who were saying that some of the protesters have taken an entire city. So the propaganda was doing its work. They were not showing how government police officers were being burned alive. No, they only show, you know, thousands of protesters saying, oh no, that's it. And when you saw that on TV and when you heard them speaking about it, it seemed as though it was a lot, but it wasn't that many people. No, it wasn't. Right? It was thousands of people, yes. But the protest that took place afterward, it was 2 million people protesting in favor of the government. The mainstream media never showed you that. When they came in support of the matter of fact, the president even participated in those protests. It was 2 million people. That was way more than the few thousand that they were showing you and telling you that the world, Iran is done and all of that. So all of that was part of that package. And that was supposed to encourage Donald Trump to say, okay, let's go to Iran. And he really, truly believed it. And so what stopped everything is when Iran took control of the internet. When they shut down the internet and they realized that some people are still communicating outside, say, oh, there are some internet that is working somewhere. And they found out that it was Elon Musk. The Russians and the Chinese came in and jammed that entire system. That was the biggest part that got them. The Mossad and the CIA were surprised that Iran was able to do that. Nobody had ever tried that before. That right there also cost Elon Musk a lot because now everybody knows that Starlink is vulnerable. And so when they did that and Iran got control over the protesters, that is when Netanyahu went back and told Donald Trump, no, do not bomb Iran. We don't have control over things. With that, you know, finally the CIA comes and tell the truth to the president. You know, they explain all these things to them. Like, look, it failed miserably. We cannot go in. If we go in, it's going to be terrible. But the second plan of Netanyahu, which he still has now, he wants the US to use nuclear weapons against Iran. Yes. Now, people say, well, Israel has nuclear weapons. Why is it that they don't use them themselves? I always doubt this thing about Israel having nuclear weapons. They probably have nuclear weapons, but I don't think they are in control of those nuclear weapons. But even at that, in today's world, to use nuclear weapon is extreme, right? The world is already against Netanyahu. So he doesn't want people to completely be against him because he will be the most hated person on earth if he does it. But he wants Donald Trump to do it. So they are using Donald Trump because they see him as someone who's not intelligent. They are manipulating him. So they wanted someone like him to blame and then to say, oh, he's mad, he's the one who did it. So that's what's going on now. So Netanyahu said, well, if we are not going to bomb Iran to the point where it completely destabilizes the country, then there's no need to do it. So the idea is that Donald Trump should use nuclear weapons. That is how bad things are. And that's what he's pushing right now. And the message that is coming to him, Iran is not taking over, because Iran is like, look, not only that they went after boats, right? Americans, oil ships, just to show the Americans that, look, we are active. This is our area. We're not going to let you do what you did in Venezuela. So it is Iran that is going after oil ships. It is Iran that is sending drones to the Armada and that Armada has even now pushed back a little bit more away from Iran, because Iran is chasing them away. And Iran is making clear that we are ready for war. We are not going to go into these negotiations with you telling us what you want. The only thing we're going to discuss is the nuclear program. We're not going to discuss the missile program or anything else other than the nuclear program. And Iran is saying that we will not ship our uranium outside of Iran. The last time they were able to ship some to Russia, Russia took it. And this was during the Obama administration when they had this deal with Obama. But when Donald Trump came the first time, he annulled that. He thought he could make a better deal and all that. And I'm pretty sure he regrets that now, because what is going on now and the way that Iran is handling things is embarrassing for the United States. It's embarrassing for the West as a whole. Because all this time they've been telling us, oh, well, U.S. is going to bomb, U.S. is going to bomb. And now the question is, why is it the U.S. is not bombing if they really believe that Iran is that weak? The reality is that they're discovering that Iran cannot be subdued. And that right there is what is extremely dangerous at the same time, because we are talking about people who never give up. Are they going to prepare nuclear weapons against Iran? My take is that that's too extreme. It's not going to happen. But if it doesn't happen, then they lost, because nothing can stop Iran. So let's watch and hope that those people are not as crazy as wanting to use a nuclear weapon.